We are a global community of people passionate about social change, and we've just been through the unthinkable. A viral pandemic combined with social, economic, and political turmoil has made the world feel smaller and excavated inequity in new ways. So, where do we even begin? Here to tell us is Ulrika Modéer, UNDP's Assistant Administrator and Director of the Bureau of External Relations and Advocacy. She works tirelessly to champion sustainability, economic growth, and equality for the vulnerable, and has been a vocal advocate for the Sustainable Development Goals. I firmly believe that in order to develop a strategy for future success in your personal or your professional life, that self-examination is the first step. You must know where you are in order to determine where you're going. This is true for organizations and societies as well. Ulrika is going to tell us where the world stands today in terms of human development so that we can know where we can take it from here. As she prepares to give us the lay of the land, please welcome Ulrika Modéer.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, let me start by thanking Cartier for bringing together this incredible group of leaders, entrepreneurs, activists, artists, and thinkers to reflect on the future of human development. Before the global pandemic struck, we knew this decade as the decade of action on the Sustainable Development Goals. A decade of efforts to realize the opportunities made and the decisions made by world leaders to guide the world towards a better, a fairer, and a sustainable future for all. Then a tiny virus humiliated the human race and humbled us, threatening to reverse decades of development. And now, what we call the decade of action has also become a decade of recovery from the global crisis. For the first time since the year of 1990, global human development is actually going backwards due to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, with the poorest and the most vulnerable being hit the hardest. COVID-19 has exposed the implications of systemic poverty, inequalities, especially gender inequality, and disregard of our planet for the human race. Scientists, they had predicted the pandemic like COVID-19 for years because of the ever greater pressures that we humans put on nature in the name of progress. And we are now in a new geological era, the age of the Anthropocene, or as we call it also, the age of the humans. A moment in history when the impact of human behavior has become the dominant force shaping the world and not the other way around. COVID-19, climate change, increasing inequalities, all of these challenges, they are closely connected. And they are all rooted in human choices. But then, if humans have the power to create an entirely new epoch like this, then certainly this, the first generation of the Anthropocene, we can use that power to change. This is a unique moment which calls for reflection on choices and on human behavior, and how we can expand human development in balance with the planet. As UNDP's 2020 Human Development Report shows, in today's world, there are countries that leave a minimal imprint on the planet. And there, as we know, there are countries with prosperous population. But not one nation in the world has yet achieved very high human development without also putting immense strain on the planet. We could actually be that first generation to break out of the trade-offs which has brought and have brought people and planet up to the brink of existential crisis, the crisis that we're facing today. Economy versus environment, state versus the market, the present versus the future, the young versus the old. And we can make choices leading to a new normal, a road towards sustainable development for both people and for planet, where societies are just and fair and where rights and opportunities extend to all. This may sound like a very daunting task, but new UNDP research with access to a lot of data shows that the impact of COVID-19 on the Sustainable Development Goals maps out different long-term recovery scenarios. And we suggest that long-term social and economic impacts of the COVID-19 are likely to widen the gap between people living in rich and poor countries and between rich and poor in countries. And right out of people that could become poor because of this decade, if we don't do things differently. These people, they will live both in the least developed countries, but also in medium developed countries and in richer countries, as marked by UNDP's Human Development Index and report. However, a widening poverty gap, for instance, is not a foregone conclusion. Our analysis, UNDP's analysis, offers an alternative scenario. Recovery under a Sustainable Development Goals push scenario, which includes a combination of bold policy decisions and choices and investments in governance, in social protection, in the green economy, and in digitalization. That could then help the world to expand the development trajectory and move us beyond recovery towards the Sustainable Development Goals. As many as 100 million people could actually be lifted out of poverty in low and medium human development countries. They could be lifted out of poverty by the year of 2030 if we do the right choices. In other words, it's still possible for countries to accelerate the progress on the Sustainable Development Goals if we make the right choices. It comes down to the choices that leaders take as they build forward better and greener from the COVID-19. Choices which seek to address the root causes of the systemic failures and trigger ripple effects across economies, societies, and natural ecosystems. Choices as, for example, when it comes to ending poverty. There could be 1 billion people in the world by 2030, which is a quarter of that due to COVID-19, living in poverty, or we could choose to do things differently with ambitious policy options and a deal perhaps on debt restructuring, opening up that fiscal space for investments in countries. We're also talking about choices when it comes to closing the digital divide. Did you know that 4 out of 5 children, they were affected as they were out of school in the poorer countries in the first half of this year, but also kids in suburbs, in rich countries. This was because they didn't have then the tools that they needed to have access to online learning. And millions of children are still out of school. We could let the digital divide deepen, or we could see to that we invest in a once-in-a-generation effort to close this gap. Choices are also made when it comes to stopping climate emergency. By 2100, the poorest countries in the world could experience up to 100 days of extensive and extreme weather events per year as a result of climate change. We could let this happen, or we could choose to see to that those 100 days could be halved by implementing the targets of the Paris Agreement. Choices also when it comes to investing in gender equality. The pandemic led to a surge in gender-based violations, deepening the crisis, and also looking at the women's economic security. That was really an area that was hit hard. We can close that gap by investing in women, which has a powerful impact as they are also multipliers of economic and social benefits that spread across our societies. We can also then, if we wish to, let the feminization of poverty caused by the pandemic deepen. Why? Why would we do that? UNDP's analysis shows that up to 83 million additional women could be pushed into extreme poverty by 2030 because of the pandemic. For us, it's of course clear that the right choice is also the smart choice. Closing the entrepreneurial gender gap could increase global gross domestic product by 52.5 trillion to $5 trillion US, according to a study from the Boston Consulting Group. The pandemic has demonstrated to everyone that we can make significant changes in our patterns of behavior and thought towards the collective good. This kind of solidarity witnessed in communities across the world needs to be replicated at the highest level possible in governments, in industry, to ensure that at the end of the COVID-19, we see a different start, a new beginning, and different choices. Building forward better and greener will require now new forms of leadership from all segments in society. Everyone needs to be part of the solution, and everyone has a role to play. And I invite you to join us, the United Nations and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, in some of our really interesting global campaigns and initiatives. Let me tell you about Lion's Share. Our hosts, Kachir, they are pioneers in UNDP's initiative, and I would like to tell you a little bit about this, the Lion's Share. The idea behind the initiative is a very simple idea. Did you know that animals have been selling products in adverts for over 150 years? And did you know they sell the products so well that the images of animals, they actually appear in approximately 20% of all global advertisements? That is a 180 billion spent every year of advertisements with animals in them. At the same time, we are, as you know, facing a severe crisis in our nature. If we do not take urgent action, we stand to lose 1 million species over the next decade. 1 million species. And the Lion's Share, they really ask the advertising companies to contribute only 0.5% of their media spend on each advert that includes an image of an animal. Those funds are then pooled and they are used across the globe on programs that have a high impact on nature, biodiversity, and the climate emergency. And we offer brands a simple mechanism to be part of a solution. Our ambition is to reach 100 million per year. And it's actually not that far-fetched, because if we look at the 20 top companies, the advertising brands only, we could reach already 40 million each year. So I urge you to look at this initiative, the Lion's Share, join us and help to save both animals and the planet. Another initiative is called Business Call to Action. Around the world, women entrepreneurs, such as the 24 Kachir Women Initiative fellows that we are and have the honor to listen to these days, they have their own communities developing SDG-aligned business solutions and models. The United Nations Development Programme is part of a unique multilateral alliance called Business Call to Action, where women-led companies have committed to providing access to essential goods and services through healthcare, education, and information, communication technologies for over 16 million in low-income countries, 60 million people in low-income countries, and to create new livelihoods and recover and give different opportunities for over 700,000 people. Through the Business Call to Action, we see that women can have an impact. Entrepreneurs that are planning for scale up, for profitable and inclusive impact, they are part of this from the outset, from their entrepreneurial pursuits. We also see that there are many barriers which women entrepreneurs face, which comes from scarcely time to lack of accessing finance. And companies founded by women, they get less than 2% of the venture capital in funding as compared to 80% of male business ventures. Why would this be? I look forward to hear from all of you speakers this week how we can break down those barriers and make things happen. Friends, the Build Forward Better from the COVID-19 crisis and to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, that is firmly backed by our initiatives, our choices. We need to get back on track. We can simply not return to the world we had before the pandemic. Our future is about closing the gaps, choosing different development parts, doing things differently. No one can predict the future of development, but we can, each and every one of us, use this moment in this time to open up for a new horizon for both people and planet. And we consider the future of development. We want to see a certain shift towards a much more prosperous and sustainable world. Just as we have made our world the way it is today, we can also make the world very differently. So this is the moment if we decide to do things differently. We have a legacy that we are creating right now, and that needs to be a legacy of transformation. Thank you very much.